Welcome to Modesto Area Spotlight.
Welcome to Modesto Area Spotlight. I'm your host today, Deborah Dupre, and I'm here with our City Council member, Tony Madrigal. And today we're going to focus on just letting Tony tell his story and give us some updates on Go Modesto and what's happening in Modesto. So I want to introduce my guest. This is Tony. Tony, we are socially distancing and we're staying apart so we can be safe. I hope all of you are being safe out there as well. And I'm hoping that you can just tell us a little bit about where you grew up and where you're at.
First of all, Deborah, you and to My TV 26, thank you so much for having me on your show. It's a treat to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Tony? How did you, how did you start? Where did you grow up, and what is your?
I'll try to give you as condensed a version as I can. I was born and raised in Turlock.
Okay.
And so I grew up as a farm worker all my, young life, and working all here in the local fields. With my family. My parents were farm workers, grandparents were farm workers, and
So you're very connected to the land.
you name it. Whether I was picking peaches in Janeiro, Belico, Turlock, or picking apricots in Patterson, Tracy, Wesley area, picking cherries in Ripon, Linden, Stockton area. Picking grapes in West Modesto. I don't know if you remember this company called Bonzi. They had a big dump basically, and they also owned a grape vineyard, and we would pick grapes here in Modesto every year, way out on Whitmore Avenue, past Carpenter Road, and then we would just be knocking almonds, or almonds as we say, knocking almonds. All throughout this county and into Merced County and other closer to I-5, just knocking almonds. And then later on in my teen years, my family got into the firewood business, and we would, chop down a bunch of mostly almond orchards.
Almond wood.
Do a lot of almond wood. I was out there with a splitting maul, just Paul Bunyaning this stuff, if you will. And so
I've actually carried a cord of wood.
So
it's a lot. It's a lot of work.
It is a lot of wood.
And my grandparents were farmers. And my dad and my dad's sister actually lived in the Central Valley and followed the harvest and did the picking too. And my dad tells me stories about having to go out and pick peaches and getting rashy and being scratchy because they're out there all day in the heat. And it's a hard job,
Long sleeves is the key.
And they swam in the canal.
Yep.
He says we would just jump in the canal and go swimming.
It was the best after a long day of being out there picking peaches or whatever.
Yes.
Especially picking peaches, going and swimming in the canal. So refreshing, keeps you cool for a little while until you start heating up again because the weather's just so hot. But I remember that. What did your family grow or your
my dad family? Just was part of the ones they traveled and they went as a kid. He was a kid. That's what they did. They went and picked fruit. And, and they would be out there all day. And he has stories, like he still tells me about being in Modesto and picking fruit and following the route, like you just said, from Wesley to Tracy to Modesto and going around and picking different things. But my great-grandfather Nikolai, he had a farm and they used to grow food and they were in New Hampshire and they grew a farm. They had a farm and that's what they did.
So you have New Hampshire roots, huh? Wow.
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, my name actually, Dupre, means fields.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah. So I'm with you right there. I know what you're talking about.
I remember there was a time when I don't know. I was a kid. I was probably about 8 or 9 or 10. I can't remember. But I was picking apricots by myself.
Oh.
And it was out in Patterson. And my father, he would always set me up to do picking kind of far away from other people, because he would tell me that if he would put me close to the people, then I would just talk too much and I wouldn't get no work done. And so, I'm a kid. I'm out there, 100-degree weather, picking apricots, dying of boredom. And so I did what a lot of the other, Mexican farm workers would do. We would just be singing songs all day.
Yeah.
I'd be singing, whatever, La Cucaracha, or whatever, just trying to kill time. And I remember this one time I was out there picking, and all of a sudden I heard somebody, yell down the road, La migra, la migra, which means immigration's coming.
Oh.
And I looked down the road, and I've probably seen, 20, 30 guys kind of running my way. Some of them were probably my relatives. They were running away, make sure they don't get caught. And I gotta tell you, without even thinking, I just jumped off my ladder, and I took off my bucket, and I started running too. And my father was down the road, and he was a foreman. He already had his green card because he had married my mom, who's a naturalized citizen. She came over from Mexico when she was little. Yeah. And he was telling all the guys where to go hide. Go that way, go that way. And he sees me running up to him, and he gets that kind of disappointed, ticked off parent look. He's just kind of like shaking his head, like, I can't believe my kid's this dumb. And I run right up to him, and he just looks at me, and a few choice words. He's like, what in the beep beep are you doing? And I told my father I thought I was in the right until I said,
well, you didn't know what it meant.
I didn't know what it meant.
You didn't know what it meant.
And so I stood up to my father, and I was like, I'm running from immigration, Dad. And he just kind of scratches his head. And he just asked me in his very broken English, but very confident English my father had. He asked me, where were you born? And I was like, Turlock. He's like, Turlock what? California? California, dude.
Like you're born here.
No, get back. And then he tells me, the instructions. He says, if La Migra comes, you tell them you were born in Turlock, California, and they know you're citizen, okay? I was like, okay. He's like, no, get back to work now. So he was.
But a little kid doesn't know. I mean, you don't know what that means.
And so that's what happened. And so I learned. For me, it was a powerful lesson I learned that day, which is that I'm lucky enough to be born in this country, which makes me a citizen. That means I, don't have to run from immigration. And, to fast forward today, that's probably one of the biggest reasons why I decided to run for city council, is because I've never forgotten my roots, where I come from, and what this country has done, for me and for my family. And this is my way, for lack of a better word, of giving back to this country that's done so much for my family. And all these families, I guess, that are, we're all chasing our own version of our American dream. Happy to have opportunity. And that's sort of I guess I'm probably fast forwarding, but just to finish telling you a little bit about my background. So I, grew up in Turlock. We moved out to my family, bought a home, our first taste of the American dream, out in Janeiro. So it was North Janeiro. I went to high school in the Houston High School District. So I went to actually junior high, 7th and 8th grade, and I went to Grattan School, which is sort of also in North Janeiro, a little small K-8 school that had like 100 kids. Like all these kids were like sons and daughters of farmers, except for me and like my 2 sisters. And this one boy named Diego, who, interestingly enough, I don't know if you know some of the families here, Diego Resendez, may he rest in peace. He was in kindergarten. He's the son of the Resendez family who has the fruit barn out there on out there on Santa Fe and Gear. You know, when you're going towards Turlock on Gear Road, and then it intersects with Santa Fe. It's right on the left-hand side. It says Fruit Barn, and they got a pumpkin patch. That family, they were also farm workers back then. I used to actually babysit that kid.
Nice.
Anyway, so I went to that school, grant school, went to Houston High School, graduated from Houston High. I went to Modesto Junior College, and that's where I started. With this major, I thought I was going to be an eye doctor, and so I started, with this major of pre-med. And I remember I wanted to be an eye doctor because as a kid I had this like clear piece of like glass or sand or plastic in my eye for months, and my parents couldn't find it, and they had taken me to the clinic or whatever. They couldn't see anything. Finally, I went to an ophthalmologist.
Ophthalmologist, yeah.
And he
fixed it.
He fixed me, and I was eternally grateful. And I remember, I want to be an ophthalmologist like this guy, and help people. So here I am thinking I'm going to be pre-med. And when I was at Modesto Junior College, I got involved in student government. And
that's where it all started.
And that's where I got bit by the political bug.
There it is.
I was a student body senator. I was a student body president. I was the first Latino student body president.
Nice.
And I just want to be accurate, though. There was a Latina young woman that had got elected a couple of years prior to me, but she hadn't finished her term. And so technically I'm the first Latino one that finished his whole term. And as a student body president as a junior college, and I got a taste of what it means to be in a decision-making position, and I'll never forget that feeling of being able to try to affect some local change versus,
Right.
And so after that, I transferred to UC Santa Cruz. I got my bachelor's degree in economics over in Santa Cruz, and then I stayed over in Santa Cruz for a few years. I thought I was going to live there, and so I ran for city council in Santa Cruz, and I won. I served 2 terms there.
Nice.
However, like many,
what was on your ticket when you were a constituent there?
My focus over there was like new leadership for a better Santa Cruz.
Yeah. And
then later I kind of changed it to I think it was my slogan was courage, commitment, community, something along those lines. And I really wanted to try to advocate and be a voice for folks that I didn't feel had a voice. I didn't feel I was represented either. Another reason I ran. And so then
you feel very community focused as far as bringing people together and getting more people involved in things to help your community to grow. And
it was very if I had to say there's probably one key issue, I would have to say it was youth empowerment, youth services, and probably housing.
Okay.
I was a red turn in Santa Cruz. Everybody on the city council back then they're all homeowners. Felt I brought this unique perspective. But after serving 2 terms over there, 8 years, I realized that what happened to me was what happens to a lot of people that are kind of my age that I experienced, for example, here in the Modesto area, which is that, I had an aging parent. My mom was, my parents were divorced. And so my mom, she was getting ready to retire from her job as a home preschool tutor for the migrant education program, which is housed through the Merced County Office of Education. And so, long story short, my mom's job was to do the homeschooling for a lot of these elementary school kids that get expelled because they're just too hyper. And that's sort of my nutshell with it.
ADHD and ADD kids.
And so, if you ever wonder what happens to those kids, they get relegated to homeschooling. And my mom has the patience of an elephant. And she homeschooled these kids, so she's getting ready to retire. My sisters at the time, they said to me, "Well, you're not married, Tony. You don't have no kids. It's time for you to come back home and watch mom."
So bye Santa Cruz.
And so they're like, "Are you almost done with the city council thing you're doing?" And moved back home. Moved back home to Modesto. I didn't necessarily want to move back in with mom because I'm a grown man. I'm like, so I found my own place. And my whole, if you will, my whole life plan when I moved back at the end of 2012 was to just do substitute teaching and go skiing more. Just that was pretty much it. And just check on mom regularly. And I moved into a small place that I sublet in the west side of Modesto. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest, I had never lived in what I would call a bigger city. Like we lived in Turlock and Janeiro. I grew up as a country boy. Right. Second half of my life, and being in Turlock, in the west side of Modesto, for me was it's a bit of a shock. Just I felt like I didn't know what it was to sort of live in the quote unquote hood, as they say. Mm-hmm. I just remember, the first few weeks there, just seeing homeless people outside my house asking me for change, pushing a shopping cart, and just some of the crime that was going on, and I got frustrated with the crime. Mm-hmm. And my whole thing was, let's try to do something about it. Let's get more neighborhood involvement. I started the neighborhood watch. Okay. In my neighborhood, became the neighborhood watch captain. I sort of still am. And then
my mom was a neighborhood watch captain for 10 years.
So you know what I'm talking about.
And so we would go to all the annual events. We bring in the police and the fire department, and they'd come and do like a annual inspection party kind of thing at the complex. And she organized it every year. So she was recognized in Sacramento for her efforts as a captain.
That's beautiful.
For championing, in Livermore. But that's a lot of work. People don't realize that it is watch, not approach. So when you see something, you report it. You don't try to engage and do something, because people get those confused. Sometimes they think they're supposed to go out there and do something about it.
Well, I'll tell you, in the West Side, there was a lot of people that we were just happy that we got together, because a lot of people didn't even want to come together, because there's a saying, for example, people say, snitches get stitches. They say, which is a way of saying you don't tell on people because it'll get back if it was you or not, and stuff like that. So we hold these meetings like in my front yard and stuff, and we held them actually in Evans Funeral Home meeting room. This local business owner of the Evans Funeral Home in West Modesto was generous enough to actually let us meet there, which is a neutral site, indoors. Nobody would see us. So we met there for a few years. And
that was probably safer.
Oh,
because then people didn't see you gathering, because I lived next door to some people that were running drugs and running guns. And I finally put cameras on the house, and I actually hired a police detective to come and check the situation, but I had a live feed that went back to the police station in order to try to capture some of this video, because it was like that. But the neighbors wouldn't even come out and do anything because they were afraid. And they knew that if somebody was to come out and say something, that would be a problem for them and their family. So what you're saying is a real thing. It's a real, sometimes you get caught up in some things, living in a situation, not realizing what you're living next to.
Exactly. So back then, I got frustrated with the crime. There was a drive-by shooting about a month or so after I had moved in. Mm-hmm. And I just got frustrated with all that was going on crime-wise. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I do have some experience, with like budgets and trying to advocate for things. And back then, my main goal was to just try to get more police patrols in my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so, as I say, I threw my hat in the ring and took out, I took out papers and ran for city council. And, fast forward, here we are. Nearing the end of my second term. My goals back then, my campaign slogan back then, and it still continues to be this day, is jobs, safety, community. Just those three pillars, if you will. Just more job creation, economic development, more safety, whether it's safety in the neighborhoods, whether it's even the safety of the air that we breathe, or the water that we drink, and definitely community is just all encompassing. Whether it's community revitalization, community investment, fixing potholes, fixing streets, infrastructure, whether it's nice parks in the not so nice part of town. Whatever it takes, and so those have been like my main focuses. I really think that Modesto's economic potential has not been fully realized, given that we're a city of about 210,000 people. I do feel that we're more than just a bedroom community for commuters that go to the Bay to work. I understand that there's higher paying jobs over there, but I really feel that we haven't fully achieved our potential to market what I think are some of our competitive advantages as a city. One of the things, I don't know if you know this, one of the things that really distinguishes us is our strategically central, I would say, location to some of the local attractions, whether it's Yosemite, whether it's Napa Valley, whether it's Sacramento.
And pretty soon the rail.
And pretty soon we're going to have
You'll have a rail that'll go right through here down south, so you'll be able to be a conduit for people coming through as well. I think Modesto has its own culture and its own synergy. The community has really come together here. I think you have a diverse amount of businesses. You have arts and crafts. You have the farms. You have the farming. You have the wineries. I mean, there's a lot here that you could actually market to if they wanted to. I mean, there's just such a diverse amount to support this community.
I think that there's potential to do so much. I would love for us, for example, to create our own, dare I call it, Yosemite Wine Valley. I don't know how much you may know or not about the wine industry, but they call them valleys and regions. That way you can legally put that name of whatever your region is on the bottle of wine.
On the bottle of wine, yeah.
So you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So we don't have
you don't have your own
region
brand.
here. Like for example, Lodi, they have their own,
right.
Lodi just up the street. Yeah. I mean, just up the freeway. But they have one. We haven't actually. It takes some legislation, but that's I think some untapped potential.
So anyone with a vineyard out there, you may want to consider that. Get us on the map for the vineyards.
Very much so.
And
it does. It's not. I mean, it's
also,
no secret we have the largest winery in the world, and it's housed here in Modesto.
And it's here.
And yet we don't have our own wine trail here, or even a public wine tasting room. So it's a destination.
Yeah, we could have like Livermore has with the tours.
Exactly.
And offer the wine tours and the weddings and the sponsorship and everything that goes with it.
And maybe at a more competitive price, price point.
Yeah.
Speaking of the tourism, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of the tour buses that offer like those European tours through European tourists, Asian tourists, where they buy a whole package, and that includes the lodging and everything. A lot of those tour buses stay in our Modesto hotels. And they just and then they just leave early to go to Napa or to go to Yosemite.
So they're using it as a stopover and to get.
And
so they might as well stop and stay and drink some wine and be here
with
us.
Take in some of our other culture that we have here in Modesto, whether it's our car culture.
We have
our agricultural history here. The ag alone, the agritourism as they call it, and then now there's even a new type of tourism. I don't know if you may have heard of it. They're calling it canna tourism for the cannabis industry, where there's literally people that are driving to cities where they have a lot of cultivation because people want to go and learn, and they actually charge for these tours of these cannabis cultivation grow houses,
And hemp is actually a very natural product for clothing, for lotions, for building materials. So like lumber is $30-$40 a board last year. It's now $95-$100 a board. Now you can get some hemp products and create your own building material.
Now you're talking.
I mean, we could do so much with that out here. And yeah. So.
The tradespeople are the ones I've spoken to, the trades, they're very supportive of developing construction materials using hemp, especially the boards and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Do we need to? So yeah, that's sort of a.
That's a good subject to get off on.
I did want to just make a brief mention, and say a shout out, just a thank you to Dr. Richard Anderson, who used to be my microbiology professor at Modesto Junior College back when I was still a pre-med major. I'll never forget, he taught me about, what a litmus test is, not just a metaphorical litmus test that people say in conversations when they talk about somebody or something, or a project, but Dr. Anderson, I still want to call him Professor Anderson.
Dr. Anderson, he is an amazing person. I met him through my TV 26. We're actually working on a project together for the homeless and putting together some of the stories and what's happening here in Modesto. So stay tuned for that. And I hope you'll be involved in what we're going to be doing. If we can include you, I'm just going to include you in it.
If I can be helpful in any way, just put me to work. You mentioned the homelessness. We as a city, I think we're trying to do as much as we can. It is very helpful to have received approximately $45.5 million in American Rescue Plan funding this year, or as people call it, from the Biden stimulus bill.
Biden bucks?
Yeah, the Biden bucks.
Biden bucks came through.
And so just a couple of weeks ago, we, I think was it last week, we approved at the city council how we're going to be spending some of this money, and we allocated $1 million to homeless services, homeless program services, to just try to, provide more resources. If there was any way that we could find it, if we can find a way as a city, as a county, as local government, or state government, to provide some of the necessary wraparound services that are needed, mental health services, casework, follow-up, combined with, housing, then I really think, I really feel that we have to just, for lack of a better word, dive deep and just have those one-on-one case.
Right.
I know that there's going to be, individuals that just may not want to help, may not be ready.
Right.
But
for those that are.
And,
we talked about the vets, the disabled and elderly. We talked about the pallets. I don't know if you've seen those pallets.
Yes, Councilmember Chris Rickey, just want to give credit where credit's due. He told me about the pallet house demonstration project that was held downtown. I was 100% supportive of it. I was working at that time. I couldn't go and check it out myself, but whatever innovative approaches we can take, I don't want any of the homeless problems that we're facing as a community to continue to exist because we as a government, we as a city did not try.
Yeah.
And so I think we cannot take a one size fits all approach.
Right.
You
have to start somewhere.
And
you have camp to home.
Camp to home. You have the Project Home Key,
right,
which is different from the Project Room Key, which was for the COVID. Right. And just taking a different approach even to who becomes the first responder if it's mental health related when you call 911 versus if it's health and safety. 211. Yeah. 211. So, that way maybe we could take the load off of our law enforcement.
So we'd like to be able to do an intake form where, you have 14 front doors behind the one door. So how to streamline that to make it easier for people to come in and get taken care of right away without having to send them off to all these other front doors to get help. So that's one of the things I spoke with your city manager's office about.
Okay.
So
here on the show or just behind your background?
I had a Zoom call with them.
Okay.
So Jessica and Edgar talked to me and we talked about this
city staff people. Jessica
city staff. Mm-hmm.
Oh wow.
So hopefully, this is going to get moving in the right direction and being able to do some of that work and the outreach. I believe they hired some people to go out on the street to do some more outreach.
I've heard about that. I can't wait to see some of the report backs on the statistics or whatnot to see how it's working. I will say this, just looking back historically in my experience on the Modesto City Council, I remember just looking back on it, the one thing that just sticks out is that if there is a place for homeless people to be able to go, then if you provide a space, then they will utilize it. And then that means that you'll see less of, the homeless people sleeping in alleys or in storefronts and doing some of the other stuff.
Well, we kind of feel like there needs to be a call to action because there just seems to be nobody is able to get this going. You can put somebody through this system, but if the system is broken and the system continues to be broken and you can't and you put the same person back out on the street, they're going to say, look, I don't want your help. I already went through your system and I'm back here again, so it didn't help me. So if it isn't working, then we have to fix the problem of why it's not working and or come up with a new solution that gets them what they need. So we're not just continually in this endless loop where it just continues to go and then nothing really happens.
And so that's actually, I think you're right. To long story short, I think that we need to be, for lack of a better word, constantly diagnosing where are the cracks that people fall
Where's
through.
the pitfall?
Where are the pitfalls?
Yeah.
And how can we, I guess,
close the gap,
constantly tweak the processes for people to be able to get help. Are the barriers too high? One idea that I have is it just has to do with a simple identification card. I'd like our city to create a municipal identification card program for folks. They may not want to go to DMV to get an ID, but instead they can just go to the city, get their photo, they get their ID mailed to them to whatever address they provide, and it's a municipal identification card. And it might be lower cost, or depending on what funding is available, maybe it could be no cost if people are indigent or they have no money. And that way, they now have an identification card so that they can then access the services. Because sometimes
that's a good point, because elderly people, as you know, they don't go drive anymore, and then they don't have a photo ID.
They may not want to go
and they don't want to renew anything and pay all that money. So you're right. If you had another option, then they could also go and vote because they'd have an ID, right? So
well, I hope there are no voter ID laws for voting here in California anytime soon. That's I'll be vocal about that. That's not something I agree with. That we ought to be having here.
Yeah, but I think if they had an ID, so there are people that are homeless that don't have any paperwork. It's a fact. They don't have paperwork. They may have had paperwork. Now they don't have paperwork. So that was one of the things in Camp to Home was while they're going through their work program, they would get somebody to help them get their identification. If they have a municipal ID, that's going to solve a lot of problems.
And so you have all these, you have like folks that are experiencing homelessness, people that are experiencing homelessness. You have people that they call, I think they're called reentry folks that are recently released from being
Prison.
incarcerated in prison.
Yeah.
And sometimes
they don't have an ID.
They don't have an ID. How can they go get one? Maybe
right. They don't have money to get one.
Maybe they might not have money to get one. The other ones are folks that are under age 16. Age 16 you get your driver's license, right? But if you're under 16, I'll be the first to admit it. I don't really know for sure, but if you're under 16, can you even get an ID from DMV at all?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's a student ID through the school.
Yes, the schools have student ID, but maybe it's not an ID that has your name, address, phone number, your weight, height, everything. And then, the seniors, folks, you mentioned seniors. And so those are just some, 4 populations that could benefit from like a specific municipal ID card program, something specific that I like to see happening. I mentioned it already at a couple city council meetings ago, and hopefully we'll be able to move forward on that. And I think also that, as far as you mentioned the call to action, before I forget, if there's one thing that I'd like to ask anybody that happens to be watching this, if there's one call to action I'd like to put out there is urging everybody, besides, please register to vote, is please use the Go Modesto app on your smartphone. I don't know if you guys can zoom in on it or whatnot, but
we'll put it up as an overlay.
Okay, so use the Go Modesto app, download it on your phone. You can use that app to basically, you can do so much with it, but you can take photos of problems that you see within the city limits, whether it's a broken sidewalk, potholes, illegally dumped trash, abandoned shopping carts, abandoned vehicles, graffiti tagging. Take pictures of these problems. You can submit it through the app with a photograph, and the city will take care of it. They'll work on this issue. Some issues take a bit longer than others. Just depends on the type of issue. I think if you ask for example, speed bumps in a certain street that they're not allowed, they might tell you that's not allowed. But the point is, you will get a response because you submit it. You have your email, and they notify you the issues in progress, the issues completed. And if you ever thought to yourself, well, why don't they you can now be that voice that takes a picture of something, you submit it, and now you're part of the community who told in this case, the city, fix this, here's a photograph, this is the timestamp and the date of when I submitted this, I expect a response back.
So is there like a first come, first serve, or is it like a priority list, or? I
will tell you a tiny tip that I've heard from staff, which is the more people that complain about one specific thing, then it gets elevated as far as escalates. So if there's say
all your neighbors,
band together and say this street light is broken, that sort of maybe
forces it to get
sort fixed. Of a squeakier wheel, if you will, about the issue.
Okay. Well, Tony, thank you so much for coming to Modesto Area Spotlight today. And I thank you for your time, and thank you for everything you told us and telling us your story. It was really interesting.
I just wanted to offer thank you for having me. I just wanted to offer, if folks need help with something in the city, feel free to call me directly. My cell phone is 209-579-4776, 209-579-4776. Or you can email me directly. It's my name, Tony Madrigal @gmail.com. That's I don't know if you guys are going to put it on the screen or not, but
we'll put everything in the links below.
Just reach out and I'll get back to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Have a great evening.
Thank
you, everyone. Thank you.